How we doing? How we doing? This is Destination Denver, Colorado, and today I'm covering the 15 biggest mistakes people make when moving to Denver, Colorado, and we're covering them starting right now. All right, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jimmy Everettson Lesson. If you're interested in learning all the ins and outs, pros and cons from moving to or around Denver, Colorado, then this is the channel for you. So that subscribe button and notification icon you see on your screen, make sure you click on that as I'm dropping new videos for you each and every week. And listen, as much as I try to be a low educational here on camera, I'm also a licensed mortgage broker covering the entire state of Colorado and team with some of the state's most talented realtors. And we're helping people move here each and every day. So the number and email you see on your screen, know that I am always the person answering your phone calls, answering your texts, answering your emails, there when and if you need me. Now that we got that fun-filled stuff out of the way, let's get to what we're here for, and that is the 15 biggest mistakes people make when they're making the move to Denver, Colorado. So I always like to say in these videos that, at the end of the day, you Google really quick. Some of these are not going to be shocking to you, but yet I hear these mistakes made time and time and time again. So these are the top 15 after talking to dozens of people about what did you regret when you moved here, or what is something that just caught you off guard. The number one that I heard was not anticipating how a change in altitude and how a change in climate would impact someone. Now, I believe that you get over altitude pretty quickly. You know, most people, it takes a handful of days, maybe a couple weeks, but that change in altitude can be drastic for people, especially if they are coming from near sea level. They're coming up, Denver's the mile high city, and then not just Denver, maybe they're getting into the mountains, they're getting into the foothills, and they're being active early on. They're going for hikes, they're going for runs, they're getting out, they're being active, they're going to the gym, they're drinking. High altitude, when you're used to sea level, you come in and you start drinking and you're not drinking a lot of water, you're not paying attention to that, altitude sickness will get you quick. On top of that, they will underestimate sunshine. The sun, when you're a mile up or you're in the mountains, that sun will get to you quick. If you tend to burn fast, you will burn very fast. You don't tend to burn, get ready, because in Denver, or especially in the mountains, if you're going out, shorts, no shirt on, whatever, you're gonna get fried quick. The other thing is, I mentioned it earlier, water intake. You get here, maybe you're not used to drinking that much water wherever you're from, but this altitude, as dry as it gets, you need to drink water. So just adapting to climate, altitude, water intake, it's the number one thing that impacts people. It's usually short term, that's what they did say, but it's one of the biggest mistakes they make is not being prepared for that. Number two, and it's a biggie, I get this question all the time, and that is not being prepared to have a car or knowing how much you are going to need a car. So for the most part, Denver is pretty spread out. Whether, it's businesses, it's suburbs, there's not a lot, it's not like a New York City, you're living in Manhattan, you walk out of your place and you walk to everything. Yes, there are walkable areas. Yes, there are places that you can live where you can get to a light rail or you can take a bus. But if you want true convenience of living in the Denver area, you want to be able to get to the city or get to the mountains or any of these things, you're going to need a car, and not being prepared for that is a big mistake that people make. Also, as we're talking about altitude and climate, not preparing to drive that car in bad weather. If you are not used to snow, you're not used to sliding or ice, that's a big factor. So if you're coming out, one, be prepared to have a car for the most part, and be prepared to practice driving in bad weather. Take your car out to a parking lot after a snowstorm and just drive around a little bit and get a feel for it. It is crucial. I would add to that they don't consider commute times, and that's tough, right? It's tough to say how long it's going to take you to drive from one place to another. But if you know that you want to live in a certain area and you know you work somewhere else, Google it and ask people. Ask people, how long do you think it will take me? The other thing is, while I say that odds are you're going to need a car, don't take public transportation completely out of the loop. You may be looking in areas where things like the light rail would be very useful to you, so just keep that in mind. The third mistake, and this is kind of humorous, but it's not investing in winter gear. If people move here, right now we're in the middle of summer, so you're okay at the moment. But once it starts to get cold, it will stay warm here, usually through September or October. You might be rocking a light jacket, a hoodie, something like that. But when it starts to get cold here, it gets cold. You need a good jacket. If you are doing outdoor activities, if you're going to outdoor events, or you're hiking, or obviously if you're skiing, I'm going to assume that people who are skiing know how to prepare for outdoor weather. But for all the rest of you, you want to make sure you have at a minimum a good jacket that will keep you warm. Invest a few bucks in a hat, maybe some gloves. It's not a bad idea, but all the time I see people not do it. Number 4, and I think this is one of the biggest stressors I hear from people, is that they don't research the job market enough. Maybe they're not sure what type of job they're going to do. Maybe they think they're going to transfer in a job, whatever, but they're not doing enough research ahead of time. They're not seeking out jobs, and tying into that is trying to secure. If you're not moving out here for a job, or you work remote or whatever, it's doing everything you can to secure a job before you get here. I see that a lot. Stresses people out where they haven't done quite enough research. They're not really sure. They get here, maybe they start renting something, and then they go, well, how is the job market in this? I don't care if you're moving to Denver or moving to, the neighboring town wherever you're from. You need to figure out if you can work or what work is going to look like, unless you have very wealthy parents. And if you have very wealthy parents, give me a call. I wouldn't mind. They can adopt me too. But all jokes aside, do your due diligence. Figure out the market, talk to people in that market, see if you can land a job ahead of time. It's going to make a massive difference for you. Number 5, and I think as much research as people can do when they're preparing to move, I think it's having a realistic idea of what your living expense is going to look like. Having a realistic idea of whether you're renting or buying a home, what that's going to look like. Really having an idea of what is affordable for you, what monthly you can do. That again ties back to the job, because if you know what job you're going to have, odds are you can kind of plan the rest. But if you don't have a job, how do you really plan for your expenses? And don't overlook the real estate market here in Denver. You might be coming from a market that is more expensive than we are, more demanding than we are, or you may be coming from a place that's slower. You might be coming from a place where rent is a lot less. The cost of buying a home is a lot less. The speed of properties selling or being rented is slower than what it might be here in Denver. So it's very important that you understand the real estate market, whether again buying or renting here, that you're doing your due diligence here, and that I would plan, be prepared to pay more. If you can pay less, great, that's fantastic, but prepare for the worst, hope for the best. The 6th mistake that people make is not doing enough research on neighborhoods. And listen, I understand that, it's hard enough to know neighborhoods, the neighborhood next to you where you live right now. But really getting an idea of different neighborhoods, different communities, and what type of things you like. People will tell me all the time, I like a lot of walkability, or, I like a safe neighborhood, or I like parks, or I like this. But really having an idea of not just what you like, but really what you don't like. Do you like density? Do you like, a lot of people? Do you like things constantly happening? Do you enjoy neighborhoods that are more, chilled out? Do you want to be close to a city? Do you want to be farther away? So thinking through that and really doing your due diligence there. I think if you're going to visit, spend as much time as you can. If you only have a couple days, it's going to be very hard. You're going to want to narrow your focus. Whereas if you have multiple days or a couple weeks, you might be able to experience more. But doing your due diligence as much as possible about neighborhoods, so that once you buy or rent in that neighborhood, you have a sense that you feel more comfortable. Number 7, and a lot of people will think that this just applies to parents, but it's overlooking school districts. And that, I'm telling you right now, does not matter if you have kids or not, or if you have kids that are going to school, even in that school district. Especially if you are thinking about moving to Denver and buying a home, you need to pay attention to school districts, because it's going to impact the price of the home you buy. It's going to impact the price of rent for a lot of people. But especially, again, even if you don't have kids that are going to deal with those schools, it's going to impact your home value. for buyers. So you want to do your due diligence as far as school districts where you're buying, just about no matter what. And whether it's your due diligence or talking to the local expert about it, one way or another, you want to have a really good idea of school districts in the area you were thinking about living in. Number 8, and I got to tell you, I even feel a little of this when I moved here, and that is not truly understanding how outdoor activity based Denver and Colorado can be. Now, when I first moved here, I've told this story before. When I first moved here, I wasn't a big outdoors person. Didn't like hiking. Certainly didn't like camping. I just wasn't that person. If I had people that wanted to take me for a hike, I would pray for rain. I'm much more outdoorsy now, and I enjoy it more now. If you're not a big outdoors person, you have to be prepared somewhat to tell a lot of people no. And that doesn't mean hiking, biking, and camping, fishing. That could be just going to the park and playing volleyball, softball, things of that nature. But we like to get outside here. It is a big thing here. Whether concerts, sitting on a patio, having a drink, or having a bite to eat. So if being outdoors is not a thing and it's something that frustrates you, Denver might be a tough spot for you. Now, do I think that happens to a lot of people? No. And I think most people, as they live here, tend to adapt and they do become a bit more outdoorsy. I'm not saying they become, Mr. or Mrs. Wilderness, but they enjoy it more. But if that is something that is not going to be enjoyable for you, that is really something to consider, because it's one of the biggest drawbacks I hear from people who don't enjoy it once they move here. Number 9, and this one's kind of random, but it was something that I just heard a lot about, and that was ignoring local taxes and local tax rates. So specifically, people who are moving here from states that do not have a state income tax. And you'd be amazed at how many people moving here do not take into consideration if their state perhaps does not have a state income tax on their wages. Then they get to Colorado, and Colorado has a flat income tax. But that impacts you. Obviously, it impacts how much money you bring home. Now, people in Colorado will tell you, well, we offset that in different ways. And we do. Property taxes, as an example, in in Colorado, tend to be lower than a lot of other areas. Thinking of a Texas, of a New York, of a California, etc. But at the same time, that's for property owners. That's for people who own a home. And if you don't own a home, if you're renting in a state that does not have an income tax to a state that does, that's going to impact how much money you potentially bring home. So paying attention to local tax rates is very important. Number 10, and I think just because it's such a big talking point, and that is paying attention to local politics. Now, again, we'll talk about Colorado moving more towards a blue state, and used to be purple, and so we'll have people leaving here for red, we'll have people coming here for blue, whatever the case may be. But I think just mainly paying attention to local, paying attention to your county, your town, your city, what's going on politically there. I think there's a lot of times where people will move from one place to another and they're just not aware. Do I think people need to be super aware of their local politics? No, I think there's a balance there, but having at least some idea of where you're moving, especially if there's certain lifestyles, certain things that are important to you that are going to be impacted by political reasons or laws, that's just something you certainly want to do your due diligence on. Number 11, and this impacts some people, and then for others, it has zero impact, and that is underestimating allergies if you move here. So I'll tell you right around, I'm surprised it hasn't hit me quite yet. We're like, midsummer at this point, but usually sometime around July, August, I start to get some sniffles, start to get some sneezes. It was a lot worse when I was younger, but allergies can be a problem here. And it depends on the area. If I get closer to downtown Denver, tends to go away. I get closer towards Lakewood, the foothills where I live, they get a bit worse. I hear about it in different areas, and obviously there are different plants and agricultures, different things growing that will impact that. But underestimating allergies can be a big deal. I'm gonna tell you, they say this is a wives' tale, grandmother's myth, what have you, but if you take a spoonful of local honey, it can't be like off the shelf nationwide honey, you find like at a farmer's market some local honey and you take a spoonful of that a couple times, I am a true believer it helps with your allergies because it's filled with all that pollen, it's filled with all this local stuff. Your body, I don't know, absorbs it, just makes you superhuman towards allergies. It's not the end all be all, but I'm telling you, year after year, it helps. Year over year, I don't exactly know, my mouth wasn't working there, but year over year, it works. Number 12, and kind of these last ones are a little more lighthearted, but number 12, this one always cracks me up, is that assuming that Denver is like a mountain town and that everything out here is mountains. So obviously we have the Rocky Mountains and it's very impressive and there's a lot to go and explore up there. But as you go east of the Rocky Mountains, Colorado is as flat as it gets. Colorado it's Kansas. There's no different. If you look east of Denver, it is flat. That John Denver's full of shit, man. So, be prepared for that. You're not moving. If you're coming to Denver, you're coming to a lot of the suburbs, you could be very close to the mountains. You could see the mountains. You could be to them in a handful of minutes or, less than an hour, whatever, but you're not in the mountains. So don't assume that's going to be the case. Don't plan as though you're going to be living in the mountains, unless, of course, you are picking a town that is in the mountains. Understand that Denver's a city in a high plains desert, flat as can be, and then as you get closer to the mountains, obviously, it turns from hills to steeps to then mountains. Number 13, and this is a big one, and I see it all the time, and that is forgetting to explore outside of Denver. And you would think, people moving here would start to explore the mountains. I could judge myself on this. I haven't explored as much of the state as I should, but really exploring. If you're thinking about Denver, you look at the suburbs around Denver, depending on where you're going to be working, depending on what that commute is, as we talked earlier, but explore. Go to some of these communities farther north. Go to these communities like a Castle Rock or even Colorado Springs south. I mentioned Fort Collins earlier to our north. So you have extremes. Those are, those could be up to a couple hours away from Denver, but there's a lot to explore. And then obviously, even if you're not big outdoorsy, explore the mountains. Get in your car, drive around, go see it. Don't just learn about Denver, learn about Colorado, because at the end of the day, Denver's a cool town, but Colorado is an amazing state. Number 14, this really has nothing to do with Denver, but again, I hear it all the time, and that is underestimating moving costs. Whether that is paying for movers, renting a truck, storage that you're gonna have to pay for, just not planning for enough funds for that, and then feeling stressed because you don't necessarily have the resources, or you have this challenge that you're under budget or over budget, I should say, as far as that move. So when you are starting to put together those funds and that plan, make sure, I'll say it again, plan for the worst, hope for the best. Budget accordingly for that move. Make sure you're prepared for emergencies. If you're driving your own truck out, what if you have to fill up a couple extra times? What if you get tired along the way? You thought you weren't going to rent a hotel room, but you do. If you do get movers, how much is that going to cost? Are there just movers out there? Are there movers here too? Or are they driving your stuff out? So really do your due diligence there, because that's a huge one I hear as people get here. They are met with instant stress because as they're arriving, they're already over budget on a pretty big ticket item that can cause that stress level to multiply fast. And number 15 is a little bonus action. So I got a few, and these were just kind of some random ones that people told me about that really made sense. So first of the bonus, cancel services, and that's cancel services where you live now. If it's a local subscription, if it's a local gym, just anything local that you pay for that you're not going to be using anymore. And I hear that more often than I ever thought I would, where someone's like, oh, I accidentally paid, I used to go to this local fitness center and I accidentally paid a couple extra months at this fitness center or something along those lines. So cancel any services you're not going to use. Second, pack an essentials box, a box that all of your important, like you need it right now stuff is in. Because, especially if you're making a long drive or, moving sucks anyway, but if it is hours or days to get here and then you arrive, you want to know at least where your key stuff, toiletries, maybe something you're comfortable wearing, anything that you're going to need immediately that you don't want to have to go rifling through a bunch of different boxes for. Make sure you pack that essentials box. It will save you so much time and anxiety. And last of the bonuses is look at storage options just in case You know, a lot of people are moving here and they don't have a lot of stuff. You know, they can move it into their apartment or home or whatever the case may be. But maybe you are moving from a bigger space into either a smaller space or even a space that you think is the same size, but something doesn't fit or what have you. So look at some storage options just in case you need to get a small unit for a period of time, or maybe you're going to move into a smaller space for a period of time. You're trying to find a way to cut costs where you can, so you're moving into a smaller space. Be prepared to find a storage unit. So those were the 3 like last minute bonuses. Making sure that you cancel services, making sure that you packed your essentials box, and making sure that you checked into storage. That was the fan favorites that they told me to share. But those are just 15 of so many mistakes that people can make when they're moving to Denver, Colorado, or when they're moving anywhere for that matter. And if you want to give me some of your horror stories, worst moving moments ever, feel free, perfect time, hit me up. The phone number, email popping up on your screen. Know that I'm always the person. Answer your phone calls, answer your texts, answer your emails. There when and if you need me. This is Destination Denver, Colorado. That was 15 mistakes people make when moving to Denver, Colorado. Until I see you next time, peace.